Good morning, everybody. It's March 18th, 2022. I'm here with Ted Chilowitz. It's This Week in XR, sponsored by Verbella. Good morning, Ted.
Morning, Charlie.
I love the flowers in the background of your...
Yeah, I'm always, just like you, I'm always on the run somewhere. So this morning I'm at another location doing some interesting work.
So we missed you at South by Southwest.
Yes. How was In the Real? Did you have a good experience?
It was great and weird.
Great and weird. Interesting. Okay. Tell me more.
Great in the sense that VR was extremely well represented. We have come, it really brought home how far we've come since 2018. Right, and keep in mind the things you're seeing at South by Southwest in 2018 were made in 2019 were made in 2018, which is 4 years ago.
Right.
And in that intervening 4 years, people are getting good at building VR experiences.
Yeah. So what were some of the highlights for you? What were some of the things that you thought stood out?
Oh gosh, I mean, I once I finished This Week in XR, which my column, which I haven't quite finished, I will move on to my South by Southwest summary.
Your report. Okay.
The winner of the competition was something called On the Morning You Wake, which is about that nuclear false alarm in Hawaii that went on for half an hour. Yes. And people thought they were about to be killed by a nuclear strike. And so what happens when you think you have 20 minutes before you are potentially killed?
Or it's over. Right.
And so, and of course, I always ask myself, why is this VR? Could this be done better, with traditional cinematic language? And, again, one of the problems with VR filmmaking, the challenge is, of course, unlike a cinematic filmmaker who has an established language, who can manipulate your emotions by using music or cutting to a close-up at a critical time. You can't do that in VR. You have to do other things. So On the Morning You Wake is something that could have been a live action documentary, but they use a variety of techniques, all of them volumetric and 3D, of course, to tell the story in the voices of the people who experienced it. And it is quite affecting and I think great use of the medium. And again, shows a certain maturity and the people with the best stuff. Also, it's not their first experience now, right? These artists,
right. They're starting
directors
to
have now made several pieces. So they are acutely aware of some of the drawbacks that I mentioned and aware that they don't have a cinematic language, right? This is different. And so they're using things that are native to the medium, like 3D, like scale and perspective, which are so important in XR. And just they made a very affecting piece. A good story well told, ultimately, is more important than the medium.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about that challenge that we have as folks that do a lot of VR, of always looking, especially when things are, a combination of live action and graphics and other things. Does it really work better in VR than on a traditional screen? And one of the call outs that I would have that I'd recommend people watch is there's a new 2-part documentary about Alex Honnold. So he's the climber that a lot of people know from that big, it was a very big commercial hit movie called Free Solo, where he is climbing El Cap without ropes. There's a VR piece on Oculus TV that, again, you start out going, okay, it's sort of documentary style, and do I really need to watch this in VR? But then when you get to the climbing material, you are really holding your breath because it really feels like you've been taken to the place where you're actually next to him on the side of the mountain. And it's pretty exceptional, that part of it. So that's one of those sort of breakthrough moments for me, where this is really doing something in VR that could not really be achieved, that sort of connection to it with traditional television or movie. So it's an interesting point that you're talking about. I recommend people.
And so the XR community was extremely well represented, although the rest of the festival was at least the convention center floor, the expo, the creative technology expo is usually mobbed.
Yeah,
it was about a third full, and there were just way fewer people. You got the sense,
wasn't all the way back yet.
You got the sense that this was an event which 8 weeks ago nobody thought would happen.
Right.
So everything you saw in terms of activation and everything else is what can be thrown together. And it very much had that feel to it, right? Mark Zuckerberg participated, but he was remote.
Right.
He did have some great people who were physically present, of course. There was,
But it was quite a substantial announcement. The NFT inside Instagram
yeah.
world got a lot of coverage and a lot of.
As you know, I am on the fence about about NFTs. They were very much a hot topic
I'm
at
sure.
South by Southwest. So, someday you and I shall be NFTs, Ted.
Yes, that's true.
Scott Galloway got on the stage. Professor Galloway, I love this guy.
Mhm.
And if you're not following him, you should, because he talks about tech and futurism and economics. He's going to be on CNN Plus. He has a podcast.
Yeah, I
with
listened to his
Kara
podcast
Swisher,
with Kara.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
So he got on stage and said, Apple's going to shut up about the metaverse. Apple's going to win, and the App Store model is going to dominate. Interesting. And then
So that,
Reggie Fils-Aimé thinks the metaverse is Roblox.
okay.
And Mark in his speech doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down on metaverse. And I have, by the way, no doubt that he is going to achieve his goal of building the Oasis. Whether anybody wants to be there other than gamers and users of their hardware, hard to say. But one of the things, they keep adding things to the Quest store that continue to make it pretty exciting all the time. New stuff, great stuff. In January, this massive multiplayer online role-playing game launched called Zenith. And it's from a company called Ramen, and they just raised another $35 million to keep expanding it. I mean, it's very popular. And Steam, Rift, Quest, PlayStation, crossplay, which is something we really have not seen in VR. I mean, it happens obviously in 2D all the time.
It's a next really big step, right? And as the VR2 system from PlayStation comes out, the idea of cross-pollination will be important. And one of the tenets of the metaverse is the idea of transportability between systems and platforms, right?
Exactly. So good for Ramen. I understand they have about 20 people. It's a very small company. So this is a very big raise for a small company. $35 million is still real money.
Yeah, significant for that, for working on a title and bringing real. I mean, they can hire more people, they can pull more resources, and I just love the name of the company. I think it's exactly what it should be.
And then there's this little XR company, I guess, augmented reality, computer vision company called MetaView. They're a Cleveland-based medtech company, and they've raised $9.9 million for a kind of 3D X-ray holographic visualization that is anchored exactly to the patient's anatomy.
Right. And by the way, so it's MediView, not MetaView, which is
that's right.
And
as in medical.
Yeah, I do a lot, obviously, in the healthcare world. And this is one of those ecosystem companies that seems to be very much in the HoloLens camp, right? For all the concerns about the HoloLens not being adopted and being used, because of the amount of sensors on the HoloLens, and it's all in one unit without any kind of tethered device, it seems to be a good choice for this kind of medical overlay with the amount of preciseness that a medical procedure would need for training and use case, right? So it's a good one to keep track of.
So who else was at South by Southwest? Nils, Wollny, and Holoride. Holoride is based on the new Vive headset, the Vive Focus. And the Focus is going to be included in new Audis so that kids sitting in the back can play video games that are precisely linked to the movement of the car.
This will be a very interesting conversation because you and I have seen this a number of times through its evolution, through not quite the precise geolocating hold and some challenges with that, but it seems to be getting better and better, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think that their biggest challenge is not going to be getting into the back of the car. It's going to be having enough experiences, enough variety of experiences in their app store, I guess. So we definitely should talk to Nils about that when he hops in about 2 minutes. Last topic I want to bring up. Why do we keep reading about IVAS, Microsoft collaboration with the military? They say it's in trouble. The rumors persist. Road to VR, which is a leading, very accurate publication about the industry, We've had its publisher and founder, Ben Lang, on the show, and they say, IVAS is tanking. So I called my contact at the Army. She's a 4-star general, and she's in charge of their new technology, and particularly high on XR. And she says this is not true. She says IVAS is a home run, and they're also using the HoloLens for training and upskilling soldiers in the field, right? Guy who is a mechanic, doesn't have the benefit of going to a training center when a helicopter is upgraded. They do that live in the field.
Right.
And so they're extremely high on XR. They work with everybody. And, they claim that IVAS is great, and, they're super pleased with the relationship with Microsoft. So it'll be interesting to see whether she was lying her face off, or whether these rumors are merely the griping of competitors.
But your instinct is you're close to her, and there would be no reason not to.
There's no, right. I mean, I think if it was fucked up, she'd be the first person to say they were trying to fix it. But she was as surprised as anyone that this was going around, because she at least is not expecting negative things. She said the soldiers love it. She said it's really hard for her to overstate how much of a video generation is now critical to the military, and how many of them there are. They're just highly literate, highly computer literate. Even the guys who don't have much more than a high school education come in knowing a lot about computers. Just intuitively, they play video games, they use smartphones, they expect to deal with computers and technology, particularly in a high-tech environment like the armed forces. So we'll see what happens with that story, because somebody is an idiot and is lying. Is it the Army? Well, we know they certainly don't have a reputation for truthfulness, but this is a real person who lives in Northern Virginia. She's an executive. Obviously, she's gonna, leave the military and get it, giant board seats all over the place. So she has no reason to, she has everything to lose with misinformation and nothing to gain. So, if this is a negative story, she would, she's either the last person to know about it, or she's lying her face off. So we'll see. I will follow up with her. Nils is here. Let's bring him in. Really interesting week. We could go on for a while, but Holoride was one of the things that everybody was talking about at South by Southwest.
Radio.
The other thing, Nils is just popping on. The other thing that I saw at South by that I really liked was Miro Shot. This is a band from Paris that uses VR in their show.
Right.
And they came to South by Southwest doing a demo of just one song with VR because they wanted to get people going through it. As it turned out, they probably could have done more because it just wasn't that crowded, right? You could get restaurant reservations anywhere. Right. You remember South by, it's like you don't make
usually a massive amount of people.
You didn't make a reservation a month in advance. You were just like standing at a crowded bar 4 deep.
Right.
You remember the JW Marriott, you can't walk through it.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't like that. I got the sense there were about half the people there. They give numbers when the show ends, which is going to be this weekend. They expect the walk-up business for the music festival to be very strong over the next few days, but certainly the first half of the festival was about 1/3 or 1/2 what it usually was. That doesn't mean they didn't sell a lot of tickets, and I'm told they were super pumped about the results of their online sales for online only. My panel with Philip Rosedale was and Rafaela Camera, all of our frequent guests, team,
all our friends,
Ready Player Me was well attended. So, but the room we had a giant room, and it was broadcast live. So there were about 250 people there, which is a good turnout, but the room was for like 500 or 1,000 people. So anyway, South by Southwest was great. What did you think, Nils? And welcome.
Thank you, Charlie. Thanks, Ted. Yeah, it was a blast. I mean, it was so good to be back after 2 years of a break, because I have to be frank, South by is my favorite festival. It was good to see a lot of people in real life again.
The XR
Yeah,
community was very well represented.
Totally. But you're right.
Ed was the only one who wasn't there.
I was the only one that wasn't there. I had a lot of FOMO last week. And
What was
usually
the
I'm
reason?
the first one there. So it's a very interesting time for me.
Yeah, but it was less crowded than the years before. That was clear. So hopefully next year we'll have the same vibe again like the years before, which would be
Because
cool.
the crowds are like a double-edged sword. On one hand,
Yeah.
you get to do everything, right? Like Spoon was playing, and usually, you know, a band like that, there's 400 people deep, just standing in front, listening outside. But you know, you basically can walk in. This is crazy, right? But that must have meant a lot of people throughput for Holoride.
Yeah, I mean, the bad thing about exhibiting or having an activation at such a festival is that you don't get to see much other than your own.
Because you're working.
Your own venue, exactly. No, it was pretty good. We had a panel on Saturday morning, also in ballroom EF, so I think it holds like 600 people or so. And at the end of the panel, we announced that people can try it. And we shared the location, and immediately once we put up the QR code, we had like fully booked schedule.
Right.
5 minutes later, that was good. You always have a few no-shows because we were in Austin East,
well,
so it was a
Southwest,
little further.
so you need to be flexible.
But that was good because we had people on site waiting, so we could fill them into the slots, which was good. No, it was fun again.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So tell us about what the experience is like, and of course how people were responding to it.
Yeah. I don't know whether everybody who listens to your podcast is familiar with Holoride yet, but what we do is we build a software stack that picks up car data in real time, the motion and the location of the car traveling through the real world, and synchronizing this with XR content. And we don't build the content for it. We built the software stack that makes the usage of XR devices in cars possible. Because if you put on a VR headset in a car, driving around, the tracking gets lost really quick. So we
right away. Right?
You're spinning, and we build a software stack that does the data fusion and then helps to generate the content in a procedural way, and also allow for persistent elements on maps. So when we started the whole venture back in 2018 as an independent company spinning out from Audi, you couldn't foresee where this metaverse dynamic will be heading. So the fusion of the real world and the virtual world. So people were very, very keen on trying it, and the feedback was really good, even though we just showed a tech demo, because 2 weeks before South by, we have announced our first partnership for Holoride ready glasses, the HTC Vive Flow, which has a very compact form factor. So it's ideal for the in-car. It's very comfy. It's perfect for in-car usage because it also, you need to plug in a separate battery pack, or you can even plug it into the car. So for the in-car usage is great for this device.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were using, the Flow. We misstated it before with the Focus, but it's the Flow, which is the ultra
It's
small.
the Flow.
Yeah, it's the Flow. Sorry, my HTC now has too many brands for me to accurately remember which is which. But
just remember the one that looks like sunglasses. So,
and it's a good device for what you're doing, right? I mean, it's lightweight and it's high res, and it's relatively simple to use. It's not. It's
exactly.
Ramp up time is easy.
It's ideal. So we announced this at Mobile World Congress 2 weeks before South by, and then at South by at the panel, Audi announced that they will be the first car manufacturer integrating Holoride into their vehicles as of summer, which was a big news. So you need a headset, you need cars. Next up, I would say, is content. So stay tuned for any further announcements. So what we've showcased.
So you have a few developers working on.
Correct. Yeah, correct. We currently work with a lot of indie studios because they love to push boundaries, and they take our tech and ask for new features and really come up with real cool experiences. Amongst them are like Shell Games, Arbori, Preloaded, Trip. So there are a few.
Yeah, Jesse Shell's
indie studios.
operation in Pittsburgh is pretty impressive. I'm not sure he's independent, but he's not small. I mean, he is cranking out titles like I Expect You to Die, great title for an escape room. And, you know, he wrote the book on game design. So I think you are in good hands there. I'd love to see what he comes up with, because the car and the motion of it, you know, offers so much potential.
Nils, I remember a few years back when you were first sort of launching all this, you had some pretty big brand partnership stuff, right? I think there was a Marvel thing you were doing and a couple other things. Is that still continuing on that track? Are you still doing that stuff?
Yeah, so we, of course, you want to bring IP to the platform that people love and can relate to. So stories, characters, worlds they already know and are familiar with. Yep. So that's definitely a road we're continuing to pursue. Initially, we also started very heavily working with indie studios. We have launched our own token a few months ago, and the funds we raised with the ICO, we basically give as grants to developers, to indie developers, to come up with specific content for our platform, so that that the initial pieces you can experience really showcase what our tech is capable of and how such an experience in the car can play out.
To build things bespoke to what you're doing.
Correct. And then of course, major IP is interesting to us as well. We were very fortunate to launch with a Marvel title or a Marvel experience back at CES, and then also the partnership with Universal in fall 2019 during Halloween Horror Nights was also a fun project.
They did some kind of Frankenstein thing or something, right? I remember.
Yeah, it was the Bride of Frankenstein ride outside Universal Studios. Did you try it by any chance?
I tried the Marvel stuff a few times. I didn't try the Frankenstein thing, but I'd love to try that.
So then the 2 years of pandemic didn't allow for much activations, demo rides, and we have a technology you really need to experience. I mean, it's in general the case for VR or XR, but especially in our case, I think it's important to jump on a ride and try it yourself.
Well, the biggest trick and the biggest potential concern is, you know, you cannot make people sick, especially in a car, right? So in VR, in some cases, just by its nature, when you're in motion in some fashion or games with a lot of motion, there's a fairly large part of the population that doesn't like those games because it makes them nauseous. So they go with games that are more static and don't make them nauseous. So it's a big engineering task that you're trying to overcome, right? And it's very admirable that you're working on this. It's great.
Yeah, we started the whole journey back in 2015, and we said, okay, we want to bring VR into cars. Everybody at Audi said, you guys are nuts. People are getting car sick, and people are getting VR sick, and now you're combining those things. But it's math, right? So minus times minus equals plus, because the fact why people get VR sick very often is when they play a very dynamic game and they don't have haptic feedback, then they get VR sick. And the other way around in cars, when you look at the screen, for example, and your body feels the acceleration, braking, or the curves, it's not matching what your eyes are looking at, and that's why people very often get car sick. But what our tech does, it's synchronizing in real time the motion with the content being displayed on the device. And this actually can reduce motion sickness for many people that are not able to enjoy visual content in cars. Not saying we're a medical device, not saying it works for everybody, but our research shows that there is a significant improvement for a lot of people, which is a good thing. But we're all about the experience, because the level of immersion is extremely high due to the fact that your body is feeling the real haptics, the real
forces of the car, right.
And your body can differentiate whether it's a simulator that tricks you or if it's real, and this makes the whole experience more immersive and more real. And I think this, and most people have cars, so everybody has the perfect motion platform outside his or her garage, which is
right. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the simulator, because in the early iterations of what you were doing, I was explaining to people, think about this like your own sort of personal simulator, simulators at scale. You don't have to go to a theme park to experience a simulator. And certain people get sick in simulators too, because it has to be so precise. the connection of the ride vehicle to the visuals, that sometimes it makes people feel a little queasy. But the majority of people love it, and obviously it's a mainstay of theatrical, theme park experiences. So
It is
taking that to an audience where you don't have to go to the theme park to experience that type of thing is a really interesting business.
It's a world scale theme park, if you want.
Correct. World scale theme park is a good way to describe it.
So what's the timeline, Nils? When do we think these are going to be commercially available to people either buying new cars or who have cars that are compatible?
Yeah, so Audi spoiled it a little bit during South by, because they announced that it will be available as of summer in almost all their cars. So A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, Q5, Q7, Q8, and all the electric ones, e-tron, e-tron Sportback, e-tron GT, which is massive.
So they're gonna provide these Vive headsets when people buy the car. They're like an accessory. You have to pay more for them. How does that work?
So they make their car Holoride ready as a standard. That means they have an interface where our application, no matter on which device it's being installed, can read out the data and then synchronize the content in real time. So this is massive. Not saying that we are launching in summer, because they will start producing the cars in summer. It takes about 8 weeks, 12 weeks until they are in customer hands, depending on where you are in the world. So I assume in the US it will be probably around October, and that's the time frame when we'll launch. Once the cars get into customer hands, then we'll launch. And
is it something you physically plug into the car, or is it all a wireless interface?
It's all wireless. So it's the signals are coming via Bluetooth in the interior of the car. So in the case of the HTC Vive Flow, it connects via Bluetooth to the car. Our application runs on the headset, so all the compute is being done on the headset. It just receives the data and then does the synchronization in real time. And the data stays in the interior of the car. It's not being sent to a cloud and back. So this would increase latency. Right, so it's all processed inside. Yeah, and also secure in terms of data protection, which is good.
Yeah, it's good.
This feels like the beginning of a trend that we have been watching for a while, Ted. The way the car is going to become driverless and actually will be itself an entertainment, let's say, immersive entertainment environment. People may use it for work. People may, use it to watch movies or consume entertainment or do VR.
Absolutely.
That's how our journey started. When we were back at Audi in 2015 and started the project, we were eyeing at autonomous vehicles. So apparently everybody will become a passenger one day. But I think in 2015, everybody expected autonomous cars will be there in 2017, which is not the case. But when we developed our prototype and also did the business concept around it, the so-called passenger economy is already there. If you think about all the passengers riding in Uber cars, all the kids and teenagers on the backseat of their parents' car, there is already a massive audience, and the automotive industry didn't really care of them. So they looked at car buyers and drivers, not so much on passengers. And we said for most passengers, transit time feels like wasted time. So our purpose when we started was, let's make transit time count and come up with a media format that is exclusive to cars, and will be an extension for IP owners and creators besides video games, TVs and shows and theme parks, that really addresses a very captive audience, because people are bored on rides, and plays with the fact that the car is on a journey in the real world. So this is also our framework, our boundaries for the creation that will happen, because it's always tied to the road network, always tied to the real world, not some abstract metaverse idea. It's always you doing this fusion of physical reality and digital reality to create something new that is unique to the car. That's one aspect, and there's another one. I don't know what kind of car you guys drive, but car manufacturers always try to get the content of the smartphone squeezed into the center screen of the car. We follow a different approach. I'm not saying that it's a competition to the existing infotainment system, but it's an extension, because we take car data and extend it to the personal device of a passenger, may it VR glasses or any XR device of the future, because we strongly believe that people will always carry their personal device with them, but switch cars more often. So it was a logical consequence to say we put everything on the personal device and just extend the car experience to it instead of going the other way around and try to squeeze our stuff into the center
actual
screen.
physical car itself.
Yeah. So that's the approach we are taking, which is I think
can
also
probably
unique.
guess the car that I drive because it does self-drive itself to a certain extent. So I would presume that.
And I would be.
And he says we're out of time. I named my dog Teddy, independent of Ted.
That's right. It has nothing to do with this, Teddy. Yeah. But I would imagine Tesla would be very interested in what you're doing and keeping close track.
I think everybody will be. I think this is a great idea, Nils. And it was terrific to talk to you this morning. Thanks for coming on our show.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely have you back at the end of the year to find out what is happening with this next new chapter.
Yeah.
And to learn
We can go to the local showroom and test it out, right? The local test it out.
Looking forward to it, and thanks for having me today. So this week I can spare listening to your podcast. So every other week I spend 45 minutes with you guys. So it's thanks for having me.
We do our best to make it interesting.
It's super cool. It's super cool. I really enjoy it every week.
All right. Well, that's our show for this week. Have a great weekend, everybody.